Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Rescued by the Seal by Fiona Davenport. Narrated by Jack Callahan and Tieran Wilder. Prologue. Huntley. I pulled my motorcycle into one of the narrow spots in front of the bank and kicked the stand down before killing the engine. After removing my helmet, I glanced at my watch to make sure I had the time right. It was a little after 2, which meant Cora had been at work for a few hours. Arriving at the same time she did seemed a little too obvious. I told myself to leave, to man up and stop pining for what I couldn't have, like a pussy. But I continued to sit there on my bike until the irrational side of me, the one that needed a hit, won out. I quickly dismounted from my bike and pocketed my keys before striding over to the glass doors. When I entered the bank, a blast of cold air hit me, but it did little to cool the burn building inside me. Cora Davis, the star of all my dirty fantasies since she moved to town a year ago, stood behind a counter, smiling at the customer in front of her. I suppressed an irritated growl. It was completely insane, but I didn't like when she smiled at other people. I wanted every one of them all to myself. She pushed her long, straight, copper hair over her shoulder, and her amazingly unique eyes, one green, one blue, sparkled. I could have dropped onto a chair and stared at her all day, even though I already had her heart-shaped face, cute little button nose, and deep dimples memorized. Not to mention all the other features of her curvy body. From my vantage point, I could only see her slender shoulders, her full, round tits, and a small amount of her torso. But behind the desk was a small waist that flared out into curvy hips, thick thighs, and legs that went on for miles. Cora had the body of a pin-up girl from the 1950s. "Huntley?" A male voice startled me from my intense focus on Cora. Fuck. Nobody ever snuck up on me. I was always aware of my surroundings. But this girl? This was what she did to me, which was one of the many reasons I had to stay away from her. I glanced to my left to see a big, muscular man dressed in black and sporting his permanent scowl. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes that only someone who knew him well would have noticed. If he'd been a normal person, his face would have been full of shock at my carelessness. "Cash," I greeted him with a handshake. When Cash and I were in the Naval Academy together, we discovered we lived in the same town. But it was a big place, and we resided on opposite sides, so we'd never run into each other. We'd both gone into Navy Special Ops and ended up serving as operational SEALs on the same team. "I've seen you here more often than I'd expect over the past year," he commented. Though his expression didn't change, his tone was curious. This branch happened to be way out of my way, so his question wasn't without merit. However, I had no intention of admitting to the real reason I'd driven 20 minutes to a bank that had a location 5 minutes from my house. "Visiting a friend," I answered cagily. It's not a lie. I considered Cora a friend. Granted, our friendship consisted of flirting at the bank, a few hellos in passing when I needed a fix, and accidentally bumping into her somewhere. Cash's gaze drifted toward Cora, and my instinct was to threaten him to keep his eyes to himself, except he showed no interest beyond curiosity. So I managed to quell the urge and beat back the green monster that spawned inside me the day I met Cora. He didn't say anything about her when he looked back at me, and I mentally thanked him for being an incredibly private guy, because it meant he didn't pry. "Poker is scheduled for Tuesday," he said, changing the subject. "Oh yeah, I responded, my mind already wandering back to Cora. He echoed the Navy expression, then lifted his chin in farewell before exiting the building. Cora's line was dwindling as the last of the lunch crowd headed back to work. The other teller said something to Cora, and then closed her window and went into the back. This was another reason I'd come in the late afternoon. The tellers rotated through their breaks after the midday rush. My feet had a mind of their own, and they walked me over to stand behind the other customers. Since she was alone, I didn't have to worry about making it to the front and being forced to go to another window. And insisting that Cora was the one to help me could reveal my obsession with her, and that simply couldn't happen. These visits were all I allowed myself. A chance to be near her without the danger of losing control and either taking her to the floor or just grabbing her and making a run for it. And they made my fantasies so much more realistic when I had a fresh picture of her in my mind. I kept telling myself that one of these days I'd snap out of it and she would no longer tempt me. But I knew it wasn't true, and after a year of growing attraction and need, I couldn't deny it even to myself. My cell buzzed, and I glanced at it only to be reminded of why I could never be with her. I was dedicated to my job, and being a SEAL made up a lot of who I was. Like an extension of a limb, so cutting it off meant losing a part of myself. I'd seen too many of my brother's relationships fall apart due to the nature of our deployments, unable to tell their spouses when they would happen, where, or even how long we'd be gone. But one thing was always clear. We were putting our lives in danger. Putting my sister through these things was hard enough. If I started a relationship with Cora and it turned out she couldn't handle my life, it would destroy me. Besides all that, I'd learned my lesson from what my sister had gone through a few years ago when my team had been betrayed by someone on the inside. She'd been forced to go into hiding with the Silver Saints MC, who'd taken her in thanks to me calling in a favor with an old friend. Eventually, we'd taken the traitor down, but not before Harlow was almost killed. Granted, it had worked out in the end because she'd met her husband and made me an uncle. I couldn't imagine that kind of luck would strike twice. And if something happened to Cora because of me, I honestly had no concept of what would happen other than to know my reaction would be nuclear. So, this was all we could have. At least until some motherfucker stepped in to do what I couldn't, and I was forced to leave before I killed him. It crossed my mind to threaten away every male who looked at her twice. Would it be so bad for her to live her life single? "Hey, Huntley." Cora's sweet voice broke through my thoughts and lit my soul with happiness. She beamed at me, and her dimples dug into her cheeks as they bloomed with pink. Her breathing increased a small amount, but it was enough to make her breasts jiggle enticingly. "Fuck, she's gorgeous," I groaned in my head. I commanded my dick to lay low, but he ignored me and attempted to rise and salute the woman of my dreams. "Hi, Gingersnap." Cora giggled like she always did when I used the nickname, and the sound sent a pang in my heart and even more swelling in my leather pants. This had to be the last time I saw her. I was leaving for a deployment soon, and I was determined to use that time to get control of myself and walk away from her. Just as I'd vowed every time I'd been on an operation since I met my ginger beauty.
Chapter 1. Cora. It had been 4 long months since Huntley Reed had last come into the bank branch where I worked as a teller, and I'd been starting to wonder if I was ever going to see the handsome naval officer again. The first time he'd come through my line to deposit a check, I'd stammered out my usual professional greeting because I was struggling with my body's completely inappropriate reaction to him. My throat had gone dry as my gaze trailed up his tall body, taking in how the soft material of his shirt was stretched taut over his muscular chest, shoulders, and biceps. My fingers had itched to touch his short blonde hair, and the knowing gleam in his hazel eyes had made my cheeks flame with embarrassment. Over the past 16 months, I'd gotten better at handling my attraction to Huntley. I'd even managed some flirtatious banter that I'd been hoping would lead to him asking me out on a date. Even though he flirted back, he'd never taken us past casual conversation. But then he'd up and disappeared, probably because he'd been deployed, and I'd started to wonder if the attraction had been completely one-sided. Maybe I'd read more into our conversations than what had really been going on. If he'd been able to walk away from me so easily without saying goodbye, then he couldn't possibly have been drawn to me as much as I was to him. It took almost all this time, but finally I'd convinced myself that I'd gotten over my feelings for him. But as soon as I spotted him through the glass windows that lined the front of the building, I realized how wrong I'd been. It turned out that the old adage was true. Absence made the heart grow fonder. The attraction had only deepened during Huntley's absence, and I found myself feeling even more tongue-tied than I had during our first meeting as he walked to the end of my line. My heart raced in my chest as I stammered my way through transactions for the 3 customers in front of him. When it was his turn and there was only the teller line counter between us, my awareness of everyone else faded away until I felt as though it was just the 2 of us in the building. In a desperate attempt to keep things professional so I could protect my heart from this sexy man, I murmured, "Good morning, Mr. Reed. How can I help you today?" Huntley's head tilted to the side, and his hazel eyes drifted over my face before his gaze met mine.
"I think we're past using last names, no matter how long it's been since we've last seen each other. Don't you, Cora?"
No way could I keep my reaction to him in check, not when just looking at his mouth while he said my name and his deep voice almost gave me a mini orgasm. My voice was breathy as I replied, "Yes, I guess we are." His lips curved at the edges, and his smug little grin sent a shiver down my spine.
"Come on now. Are you really going to leave me hanging like this?"
I knew what he was hinting at, but I wasn't going to admit it. Not when he'd been gone for so long. I liked feeling as though he was the one who was second-guessing my interest in him for a change, even if I was fooling myself, because my blush totally gave me away. Widening my eyes, I pasted an innocent expression on my face and asked, "I'm not sure what you mean."
"Nice try, Ginger Snap. But we both know that you get exactly what I'm saying."
I felt a surge of triumph at the gleam of masculine approval in his hazel eyes, but that was nothing compared to having him use his nickname for me again. I'd been called so many horrible things growing up with red hair, but Huntley's pet name more than made up for those experiences. I never thought the day would come when I'd laugh over anything having to do with my hair color, but I couldn't help giggling each time Huntley called me Ginger Snap.
"It's been too long since I've heard you say my name."
I leaned forward and whispered, "You're the one who stayed away, Huntley."
"Not by choice, Cora."
His eyes darkened to a brown hue as he gripped the edge of the counter separating us. His hold on the walnut surface was so hard that his knuckles turned white.
"Trust me. I've tried to stop myself from driving clear across town to come to this branch, but I failed over and over again."
I was torn over how to feel about his confession. A part of me was thrilled he kept finding himself drawn to me, but I was also crushed to hear he'd been trying to resist the attraction between us. That was the side that won out as I straightened my spine and replied, "Seems to me like you did a bang-up job of it for the past 4 months."
I've only been back in town for 48 hours, and most of that time has been spent debriefing from my last mission."
He reached out and wrapped his fingers around my wrist, and my pulse skittered wildly as his thumb brushed over my skin.
"Coming here to see you was the first thing I did after grabbing a shower, eating some decent food, and passing the fuck out because I was so damn tired."
Whoa, that was one heck of a confession. All my doubts about misreading our interactions disappeared, replaced by a certainty that Huntley was just as attracted to me as I was to him. I was overwhelmed by a sense of relief and had to swallow down a lump in my throat before I could say, "I don't understand. If you want to see me so badly, why have you been trying to stay away?"
"Because I'm no good for you, Gingersnap."
I would have thought he was just making up an excuse for not acting on the chemistry between us, except the words sounded as though they had been pulled from the depths of his soul. Shouldn't I be the one who gets to decide if I'm better off without you or not, Huntley? For a moment I thought he was going to agree with me, but then a muscle jumped in his jaw as he seemed to shake off the impulse.
"Not when you're the one who'd get hurt if you were wrong."
"Fine. If you don't want to give me a chance, then I guess there's nothing I can do about it." I shook off his hold and snatched the check and deposit slip out of his other hand. Keeping my gaze on the computer screen in front of me, I focused on my breathing while I pulled up his account and went through the steps to process his transaction. It didn't take me long, but I'd managed to pull myself mostly together by the time I was done. I didn't look at him as I slid his receipt across the counter.
"Cora,"
he sighed, crumpling the paper in his fist. My head jerked up before he could say anything else. "If you're not going to ask me on a date, then there's nothing personal left for us to say. Have a nice day and thank you for your business."
"Fuck,"
he groaned as he shoved the receipt into his pocket. "Nope, sorry, there will be no effing between us because we're never going out. I guess I'll just have to finally take someone else up on their offer instead of waiting around for you." I wasn't being entirely honest with him. Although I usually got asked out at least once a week by a male customer, I'd never been even the tiniest bit tempted to accept any of those offers. Unfortunately for me, the only guy I was interested in was Huntley, and he seemed determined to ignore whatever was happening between us. It wasn't nice of me to lie to him like that, but I was hurt by his rejection and lashing out in my pain.
"No fucking way,"
he gritted out, reaching out to grip my chin. I had a hunch my verbal jab pushed him over the edge, but I didn't get the chance to see how he would respond. My eyes went wide when I glanced over his shoulder to avoid his gaze and saw several guys in ski masks. I didn't have any time to react before the one closest to us aimed his gun toward the ceiling, fired off a shot, and yelled, "Everyone, get down!"
Chapter 2. Huntley. "Shit!" Cora gasped, and I grabbed her hand, giving it a squeeze and nodding, silently telling her everything would be all right. She still looked terrified, but her eyes softened a tiny bit, looking back at me with trust. Before turning around, I zipped my jacket to keep them from spotting the Glock in my shoulder holster. I dragged my gaze away from Cora, and as soon as she was out of my line of sight, my brain finally kicked into gear. I shoved away the rage and jealousy that coursed through me when she mentioned dating another man. I'd figure that shit out later. I needed to focus on what was going on, since I'd been too distracted to notice what had been about to happen in the first place. My eyes scanned the room, cataloging every detail. 4 robbers dressed in black and wearing ski masks, all men from the looks of their build. I memorized their height, weight, and any other distinguishing features I could see. Between the 4 of them, they were packing 4 M4A1 automatic rifles and 4 openly visible Desert Eagle handguns. I clocked 2 more handguns, both shoved into the back of two of the robbers' pants. As I watched their movements, one barred the door and lowered the shades, while another collected cell phones from the patrons and instructed them where to sit. At the same time, one disappeared into the back, presumably to flush out any other employees, and the last one tossed an army green duffel bag to each teller and demanded they fill them from their tills. Their actions were well coordinated, and they moved in sync with each other, suggesting they were a crew who worked together frequently. I doubted many would have spotted their earpieces, but I'd seen the best of the best when it came to equipment in my job. The tall, skinny guy corralling the patrons pushed us all into a corner and told us to sit down. After the rest of the employees were ushered over to join us, a guy built like a brick house, I could tell he was the one in charge, made a hand signal, and they grabbed the bank manager by the arm, lifting him to his feet and escorting him to the back. The tellers were told to sit with the rest of us, and Cora hurried over to drop down beside me. I put my arm around her and tucked her close to my side. She glanced up, but I shook my head when she looked as though she might speak. One of the two men left in the lobby touched his ear for a moment, then his gaze scanned over the hostages, eventually landing on Cora. Fuck. I wasn't about to go John McClane on his ass and risk anyone getting hurt, but it took everything in me to let Cora go when he stalked over and demanded she stand. Her frightened eyes met mine before he squeezed her arm and dragged her to the back. The remaining robber was slowly pacing the room, his rifle resting on his shoulder. He did a sweep of the area every few minutes, including a lingering glance out the window on the opposite side from us. Whenever his eyes left the hostages, I scooted backward inch by inch. I knew I was an intimidating presence, and most people tended to let me lead in any situation without even realizing it. So it wasn't surprising when the crowd parted a little at a time, allowing me to make my way to the back. Then they swallowed the whole. I was impatient, but I kept myself in check, knowing that too much, too fast would bring my movement to the robber's attention. Once I was behind everyone, I crouched low and slowly unzipped my jacket. Being a SEAL, stealth had become a habit, and I carried a suppressor with my subsonic 9mm. I withdrew both and screwed the silencer on. A few of the hostages were gazing at me with worried expressions, and a nervous few looked as though they might cause a ruckus, drawing the robbers back into the room. I met their gazes with a look of authority and warning. Then I locked eyes with a few who looked like they could help keep them calm, and lifted my chin. I received nods in return, so I focused on the robber once more. I held my weapon under my jacket, watching and waiting for the right opportunity. When the silence was broken by the sound of police sirens, the robber skipped his scan of us and walked over to the window to peek through the slatted shades. Removing my pistol, I aimed and waited until the very last second, allowing the sirens to become louder and hopefully muffle the sound of my gunshot. Silencers only suppressed the noise so much, and I didn't want the crew in the back to realize I'd taken out their man. Thankfully, the criminal telegraphed his movements, and police cars had reached the building by the time he made a move to turn around. I slowly straightened and took aim. Before he noticed me, I had a clear shot and put a bullet in his temple. He dropped to the ground, and I shot another warning glance at a woman who tried to scream. Thankfully, someone pressed their hand over her mouth before she made a sound. I made my way to the fallen robber, checking to make sure he was dead, even though I had no doubt. Then I removed both of his guns, unloaded them, and set them on a desk. When the phone rang, I thanked my lucky stars that I was standing right in front of it. I grabbed it before the first ring was done. The woman on the other side of the line introduced herself and asked who she was speaking with. "Lieutenant Huntley Reed," I replied in a low tone. "I'm with the other hostages in the front lobby, currently unguarded because I took one of their men out." Before she could ask any more questions, which would only try my patience since I was used to efficiency, I gave her the rundown of everything I knew. The only time I nearly lost my cool was when I told her they'd taken one of the tellers to the back with the manager. "I'll unlock the front so you can begin helping the hostages, but your men better be fucking silent, because if they alert one of the other robbers and that teller is killed, I'll have their careers and their heads." She started to say something else, her tone indignant, and I growled, "You can send your best man to go with me, but I will go after those hostages." I hung up while she spluttered, then crept over to the front door and quietly flipped the lock. 2 men in bulletproof vests and police uniforms came in and went right to the group of scared patrons. A third walked in and nodded to me, his vest indicating he was FBI. From the way he carried himself, his haircut, and the belt perfectly straight with the gig line, this guy was active or former military. I cocked my head toward the back, and he nodded, drawing his weapon. He silently followed me as I headed for the door to the teller area. There was a small bank of televisions, and I glanced over them all until I spotted the 3 men at the vault. One was holding the manager, and the other had an arm wrapped around my girl. That motherfucker wouldn't be carrying that limb around for long. We crept down the hallway, listening carefully. When we were around the corner from the vault, someone spoke. "We don't need to." "Better leverage," another grunted. "Maybe," the first guy muttered. "As long as I get to be in charge of this tasty piece of ass, you can do whatever the fuck you want." The agent with me must have seen the rage and murderous intention on my face, because he grabbed my arm in an iron grip and shook his head. I took 2 long, deep breaths and mentally shouted at myself to remember my training. I'd never allowed myself to be distracted during a mission, but apparently, when it involved Cora, all of my skills went out the fucking window. "We're about done," a third voice, I was pretty sure it was the brick house, grunted. "Larry, lock the hostages in the break room and head back here." Silence. "Larry." Silence. "Want me to check on him?" "No, we need to get the fuck out of here before the police storm the building. Something has happened to him, or he's not paying attention. Either way, I'm leaving." The agent and I suddenly rounded the corner, guns aimed at the heads of the 2 men who weren't holding Cora. "Let them go," I warned in a deadly tone. I gave myself one brief glance at her to make sure she wasn't harmed before focusing on the 2 bastards threatening her. The man holding the bank manager started to put a gun to his head, but I put a bullet between his eyes before he'd even lifted his arm halfway. The manager fell to his knees, and tears streamed down his pudgy face as he scrambled into a corner, curling up to make himself as little as possible. Pussy. "Make another move, and I'll kill her," the brick house responded flatly, obviously not bothered one bit by the fact that I'd just killed his crewmate. "You wouldn't make it a single step before I took you down," I snarled. "Maybe, but I'll take her with me." He gestured to his last conspirator. "Grab the bag." The other man picked up a small sack. They left everything else as they backed down a hallway to the rear exit. "Tell them to let us through, or she's dead." The agent spoke into the radio on his vest before nodding. "You're clear." When I finally let myself meet Cora's eyes, they were filled with terror. But she wasn't falling apart, not even a glimmer of tears in her eyes. I was so fucking proud of her, and her show of strength just hammered home the fact that I'd been shortchanging her. She was right. The decision to be together wasn't mine alone. You're going to be all right, Gingersnap." "I know," she said softly, her voice steady as she looked at me with faith in her expression. Letting her down wasn't a fucking option. Now that I'd finally given in to my need for Cora, I wasn't about to lose her. "Once we're somewhere safe, we'll call the bank and tell you where to pick her up." "If she so much as breaks a fingernail," I growled, "I'll make you bleed before I end your life." My gaze never wavered from the dead man holding my girl as he exited the building. I looked for an opportunity to take him out, but I wasn't going to risk it unless I was certain there was no chance of Cora being hurt. The agent and I followed them outside, and the man holding the bag jumped into the driver's side of a nondescript white van. The other carefully maneuvered into the back, basically using Cora as a human shield. Police cars raced after the vehicle, but 10 minutes later they radioed to say they'd lost it when at least 5 matching vans entered the highway, clearly there to give the robbers cover. I was being debriefed by the FBI agent in charge when they called it in. My hands balled into fists, and I counted to 10 so I wouldn't put a dent in the car next to me. "We're done," I announced, and stalked away, pulling out my phone and hitting a number as soon as I knew I wouldn't be overheard. "Reed?" Cash answered after one ring. "I need your help."
Chapter 3. Cora. I'd kept my eyes on Huntley the entire time the robber dragged me out of the bank. He was my lifeline, keeping me calm right up until the moment when the door to the white van slammed shut. I felt as though all of the air was knocked out of my lungs when I was shoved down and the van sped forward, but not because of how hard I landed. The loss of Huntley's steady gaze was what impacted me the most. I was filled with regret over waiting so long to speak up about my feelings for him. If I'd said something sooner, forced his hand before he'd been deployed 4 months ago, maybe we would have had time together as a couple, and I would have had the chance to get to know Huntley, to learn about the things he liked, go out on dates, feel his lips brush against mine as our tongues tangled together while we kissed. Being taken hostage by 2 bank robbers, one of whom creeped me out big time with all his talk about the things he wanted to do once he got me alone, made me wonder if those things were ever going to happen. I didn't doubt that Huntley would do everything in his power to find me, but I wasn't sure I would be the same person when that happened. I'd already seen someone die after Huntley shot the robber who'd been ready to aim his gun at my boss, Mr. Jones, and I was ashamed to admit that a part of me had wished that the one who was using me as a shield had been the one he'd killed instead, because then I'd be free. Or at least the creepy jerk wouldn't be in the back of this van with me now. While his partner was busy evading the police cars who were chasing us, he'd taken full advantage of our position to cop a few feels. But he'd paid for it when I nailed him in the balls with my knee and was still cupping his groin a few minutes later.
"Secure the girl and get up here,"
the huge guy in front growled.
"I need you to keep an eye out to make sure we aren't spotted by the cops."
"Didn't the trick with the other vans work?" The robber holding me grunted as he reached for some rope to tie me up. I cried out when he yanked my arms behind my back and roughly secured my wrists together. "Serves you right, bitch! I'm not going to be gentle with you when we get to the warehouse either. With the setup Jack has there, the cops and that jackass who killed Stephen will never find you, and I'll have all the time in the world to make you pay for your little stunt."
"Shut your fucking mouth or you won't have the chance to do a damn thing. I'll kill you and let your body rot in the back of this van."
I shivered at the deadly threat, but the skeevy dude didn't seem to understand that his partner meant every word. As he climbed into the front passenger seat, he whined, "What the hell is wrong with you, man?"
"No names. I reminded you of that rule right before we walked into the bank, remember?"
Jack snarled as he took a sharp right, sending me rolling onto my side.
"Now the girl knows my name. which will make it easier for the cops to figure out who I am."
"Not if they never find her," the creepy robber argued, leering at me over his shoulder.
"You really are a dumb fuck,"
Jack sighed and shook his head.
"The guy at the bank meant his threat. If she dies, he isn't going to stop hunting us until we're both 6 feet under."
The other guy rolled his eyes before turning forward again. "You're acting like he's Liam Neeson. This isn't an action movie, and that dude has no fucking clue where we're headed."
"The guy was clearly military, you idiot. Special forces, if I had to guess. And now he's motivated. It's personal for him."
There was zero emotion in Jack's eyes when he looked at me through the rearview mirror.
"Because we took her."
I gulped down the lump of fear in my throat, even while I offered up a silent prayer of thanks that Huntley had picked today of all days to come into my branch. Jack was right. Even though he'd been doing everything he could to resist the pull between us, I knew Huntley would do whatever it took to find me. The promise had been there for me to see in his gorgeous hazel eyes when he told me that I was going to be all right. The skeevy guy had to have been blind because he hadn't seen how determined Huntley had been. "I'm sure we'll be fine. We've pulled 6 jobs together, and the cops have never been able to ID us or find the warehouse. Without their resources, that dude doesn't stand a chance." I pressed my lips together to keep myself from disagreeing. Although I didn't know a lot about Huntley, there was a guy I'd seen him talk to a couple of times when they'd been at the bank at the same time. Both of them were in the Navy, as were a lot of our customers because of our proximity to the base. But I was pretty sure Huntley and his friend were SEALs, especially because they were stationed here, where one of the special warfare groups was based. I'd never worked up the courage to ask Huntley if he was a SEAL, but I hoped I was right, because I really needed a hero to rescue me right about now.
"The police can only go so far. They have rules they need to follow. Not him. The way he moved and handled his weapon told me everything I need to know. He's a stone-cold killer who will stop at nothing until he gets her back."
Typically, I wouldn't want to agree with a guy I assumed was in charge of a robbery crew, but I took comfort in the fact that Jack seemed just as certain about Huntley as I was. I didn't stand much of a chance against these two on my own with my hands tied behind my back and knowing they had guns. The only thing I had going for me was the warning that Huntley had given them. Shuffling to a seated position, I used the weapon he'd given me as best I could. "You're right to be worried. Huntley meant what he said back there. Your best bet is to drop me off now and put some distance between us before he catches up. As long as I'm not hurt, he won't go after you. I'll make sure of it." Jack's gaze turned considering as he glanced at the rearview mirror again, but his partner wasn't convinced. "Come on, man. She's our only leverage. We can't give her up now." "Are you really going to trust him to make the decision?" I raised my eyebrows and shook my head. "He's not worried about using me as a bargaining chip if you guys get caught. He wants to keep me around because he's a pervert who's pissed that I kneed him in the balls when he tried to feel me up."
"Fucking hell, man."
Jack glared at the creepy dude.
"Do you have a death wish? Because I'm damn sure her man is going to take you sexually assaulting the girl a fuck of a lot more seriously than her breaking a nail."
"I barely even touched her," his partner whined, crossing his arms over his chest as he turned to look out the window. "And I still say that you're making too much out of that dude's threats." I barely stifled a gasp when Jack pulled a gun out and rested it on his thigh. The other guy didn't notice, and I wasn't about to warn him when he was the one who was the bigger threat to my safety.
"You're wrong. We're down 2 men already because of that guy."
"We don't know what happened to Larry." Jack's finger slid over the trigger, and my whole body tensed in fear.
"Her man was in the lobby and had a fucking silencer on his weapon. What the fuck do you think happened to Larry? He's dead, just like Stephen."
He lifted the gun and fired a bullet straight into the other guy's head.
"And just like you now, too. Fucking idiot."
At the sight of another splatter of brains and blood, my vision grayed. I let out a little whimper of distress, and Jack's attention turned to me.
"I'll give you the same warning I did him. Shut your fucking mouth or I'll take my chances with your man, kill you, and let your body rot in the back of this van."
I was a heck of a lot smarter than his dead partner, so I nodded and didn't say another word.
Chapter 4. Huntley. Cash met me at my house 15 minutes later, as well as Sterling, who was on our intelligence team, and Deacon, whose specialty was surreptitious entry and technical surveillance operations. Cash and I both had specialty training as snipers and advanced air operation. Not that being a jump master or parachute rigger would help us find Cora. The four of us lived the closest to our base, and I was grateful that we'd just returned from a deployment because it meant they were home. "Not out here," I grunted as they all exited their vehicles. "It's the girl from the bank, isn't it?" Cash asked once we were inside. I tossed him a dark look, and he held up his hands in surrender. "Not saying we shouldn't help her, just asking." Quickly, I explained the events from the robbery. I didn't go into why I was desperate to help Cora, other than her being an innocent woman who'd been taken hostage. I must not have hidden it all that well, though, because I saw the realization in their eyes. I pivoted and marched down the hall to my office, assuming they would follow. I didn't have the level of technical skills with a computer that Deacon did, but I wasn't a slouch either, so my setup was very sophisticated. Deacon took a seat and started tapping on the keyboard. Within a few minutes, he found the footage from the bank cameras. Then he asked me about routes, and we speculated, trying a few different sets of streets and highway cams before we finally spotted the vans. While Deacon followed the paths of the vehicles, the rest of us analyzed the bank footage. "They are a practiced team," Sterling murmured. "But look at their body language in the beginning, when they're all together. This one is clearly in charge." I nodded, recognizing the guy from the vault. "But the other three don't respect him, and they certainly don't trust each other." "Damn, Huntley," Cash said when the film showed my 2 kills. "Nice shots." They'd been easy for someone with my training, but we could still appreciate the perfect placement of the bullet wounds. "Why didn't you go for the guy holding the girl?" Sterling asked, his brow lowered in confusion. "He didn't want to chance hitting her, dipshit," Cash said, rolling his eyes. "When's the last time you missed a target?" Sterling's tone was exasperated. "Doesn't matter," I muttered. I wasn't about to take a chance that this would be the one to break my streak. "I've got something." We all gathered around Deacon to look at the 2 screens in front of him. None of the vans have plates, but it's impossible for them to all look exactly alike. He froze 2 pictures and pointed at the first van. "This is the one that pulled out of the bank parking lot." He pointed at a second screen. "Looking at the others in comparison, there are subtle differences. This one's mirrors are bent at a different angle." He hit a key, and the screen switched to a view of another van, so it was side by side with our perps. "The back right tire on this one is brand new." He was right. Even from a traffic cam, the condition of the wheel was obvious. It was cleaner, especially the tread, but from the small amount in the grooves, it was clear that they had no wear on them. Deacon found the differences in all the other vans, and we went back to the footage of all of them on the highway. Once we singled out the van holding Cora, we followed the vehicle to a warehouse on the edge of the next town over. The van disappeared through a garage door, and nothing emerged in the time between then and now. I stood to my full height and glared at the screen for a moment, then snapped, "Let's roll." We made our way to my garage, where I kept my tactical shit. It was all civilian-grade equipment, but it would do the job. After gearing up, we loaded into my SUV and set a course for the warehouse. It wasn't a long drive, but I knew how quickly we arrived could make all the difference. I was usually calm and cool during missions, but this time it involved my girl, and I was jumpy and out of sorts. What if I didn't arrive in time? What if he hurt her, or they were gone? I was kicking myself for dragging my feet, for never feeling her body pressed to mine, never tasting her sweet lips. When we rescued her, I vowed to stop being such an asshole and man up. I was going to claim my woman. Sterling had advanced driving training, so I deferred to him when it came to getting behind the wheel. He managed to cut the 30-minute trip down to 15, but still, every minute had chafed. My phone rang just as Sterling was parking the car down a back road under a copse of trees to make it less obvious to passers-by. I was going to ignore it, but the name on the screen caught my eye. Shadow. Shit. It was the stupid name I'd given Merrick, my former teammate, after he'd gone dark. A few years back, we'd been betrayed by a member of our team, and it had nearly cost several of us our careers and lives. Merrick had been the one to go rogue and take the traitor out. Since then, he'd joined a corporation as a wetwork specialist. Wouldn't have been the road I'd chosen, but he was still my friend, and I owed him. "Can this wait?" I barked in lieu of a greeting. "I think you're going to want to hear what I have to say before you go into that warehouse, guns blazing," he drawled. What the fuck? This is a you help me, I'll help you kind of call. "Details," I demanded impatiently. "The man you're hunting, Jack Carlson, he's one of my targets. I've got my hands full with an unexpected situation." I heard a muffled voice in the background, and he covered the receiver to say something to them. But his words still came through. "You're gonna earn yourself another spanking, Audrey. Now, be a good little girl and behave." My eyebrows shot up, but I didn't have time to figure out what kind of shit Merrick had gotten himself into. When he spoke again, it was unmuffled. "I'm going to send you the warehouse blueprints. Take him out for me, and I'll owe you." "No," I disagreed. "You'll never owe me, brother." Merrick was silent for a moment. "It'll make us square, then. Deal. You'll have the plans in 30 seconds. Send proof that it's done for my employer. Just keep everyone out of the fucking picture so no one realizes it wasn't me who did the job." "Done," I agreed. Even though he was no longer with the Navy, I murmured, "Hoo-yah," because it still represented the bond we shared. He repeated the phrase, then we hung up just as my phone pinged with an incoming secure email. The boys were all quiet, and Deacon was watching me with one eyebrow raised. "Merrick needs a favor. He sent the blueprints." That was all they needed to hear. We'd studied the warehouse from aerial views, and after going over the blueprints, we found 2 entrances other than the garage door. There were some windows as well, but they were high up near the roof, and anyone dumb enough to jump from one of those wouldn't be running anywhere. We unloaded from the van and armed ourselves to the teeth before stealthily approaching the building. I pointed 2 fingers toward the front. Cash and Sterling nodded and went that way, while Deacon and I trekked to the back. The door was heavy steel, not something we could bust our way through without the right equipment. A noisy entrance would only alert the robbers anyway. Deacon rolled his eyes after inspecting the keypad mounted on the wall. In less than 30 seconds, he'd bypassed the alarm and unlocked the door. I owed some maintenance guy a bottle of fine whiskey because the door slid open soundlessly. We crept in and found ourselves in a large, open space, but the only light was coming from the high windows. It cast shadows everywhere, but the space felt empty. My stomach flipped at the possibility that Cora might not be here. Deacon distracted me from my thoughts when he began to cross the room. I stayed on his six and protected his back. Once we were on the other side, he released the catch on the other door and opened it to let Cash and Sterling into the building. Cash's eyes did a sweep of the place. Then he pointed his rifle to the left, and I lifted my chin in acknowledgement. Sterling and Deacon echoed the motion, but in two other directions. We split up and silently explored the room. I almost missed it, but when I reached one corner, I spotted a crack in the metal wall and realized it was a shoddy, makeshift door. I leaned in and closed my eyes, listening for any sound. It was so soft, I almost missed it. The shuffling of shoes on the concrete floor. I assumed the person was pacing from the way they faded, then got louder, before fading again. I stepped out of the shadow and waved down the boys to hurry over. With hand signals, I told them to cover me, and I was going in. Cash, Sterling, and I trained our guns on the door while Deacon wrapped a hand around the knob and held up 3 fingers. When he dropped the last one, he yanked open the door, and I rushed inside, followed closely by the others. A man with greasy black hair and a face that had clearly been in one too many fistfights whirled around in shock. Brick house. I trained my eyes on him and didn't look around, knowing that I needed to keep my focus on this piece of shit before Cora distracted me. "Drop it," I demanded, using the barrel of my gun to indicate his weapon. He looked like he might argue at first, but seemed to quickly realize he was outmanned and outgunned. His gun fell from his hands and hit the floor with a clang. "Where's your partner?" Cash asked coolly. "Dead." His expression remained blank, his eyes devoid of emotion, obviously not regretting his actions for a second. A small whimper reached my ears, and I whirled toward it to see Cora curled up in a corner, duct tape on her ankles, wrists, and mouth. I took one step toward her, and her eyes flicked over my right shoulder with fear. I flipped around, gun raised, and put 2 bullets in the brick house. A hand came down on my shoulder, and I nearly took Sterling's head off. "Relax, man. We're going to do a sweep and make sure we're all clear." I nodded, knowing it needed to be done, but loathing to leave Cora for even 1 second. I made a move toward the door, but he pulled me to a stop. "Take care of your girl."
Chapter 5. Cora. When Jack had shoved me into a corner, I'd started to worry that Huntley wouldn't get the chance to rescue me. There'd been no way for me to catch my fall. Not after he had wrapped so much duct tape around my wrist that you couldn't see the rope underneath, and followed that up with circling it around my ankles and slapping a strip over my mouth. And he hadn't been careful with how much force he'd used either, barely sparing me a glance when I cried out. He'd ignored me, pacing back and forth while muttering beneath his breath about how wrong his plan had gone. After warning his now-dead partner about Huntley's threat earlier, he didn't seem too worried about me getting hurt, and I figured that didn't bode well for my safety. I was starting to doubt that I'd make it out of this warehouse alive when Huntley showed up with a few other guys, and then I was afraid Jack would kill him instead when he'd turned to look at me. But in the end, everything turned out okay. I'd never have to worry about the hulking guy who would have been more than happy to kill me because Jack was the one who died instead. Tears of relief streamed down my cheeks as Huntley prowled toward me. After dropping to his knees, he set his rifle on the floor to his left and carefully removed the duct tape from over my mouth. He was still gently tugging strands of my hair from the adhesive, since Jack had gone overboard and wrapped it all the way around my head, when I gasped, "You have no idea how glad I am to see you."
Probably about as fucking happy as I am to have found you relatively unharmed.
He freed the rest of my hair from the tape and tilted my head back to press his forehead against mine.
If I'd been even just a few minutes later, that bastard might have lost it and...
I closed the gap between our mouths to stop whatever he'd been about to say. I only meant for it to be a quick brush of our lips. But Huntley took control and deepened the kiss. His tongue demanded entry to tangle with mine, stealing my breath until I forgot where we were. But when I tried to lift my hands to grip his shoulders, I let out a little disgruntled whimper because they were still tied and taped.
Fuck. Sorry, Gingersnap. You have the unique ability to make me lose my head.
I was grinning like a loon while he went to work at releasing my ankles and wrists. If anyone had seen me, they probably would have wondered if being taken hostage and seeing 3 men die had made me lose touch with reality. But I couldn't help smiling at the realization of how much of an impact I had on Huntley. When I was finally free from all the tape, I heaved a deep sigh of relief. Thank you for rescuing me.
You don't have to thank me, Gingersnap.
He stood and helped me to my feet since my legs were a bit wobbly.
I'll always come for you, because you're mine. Nobody will ever take you away from me.
Although I understood how the robbery could have changed his mind about the reasons he'd been trying to stay away from me, I was worried about how quick he'd move from telling me we couldn't date to calling me his. That's not just the adrenaline talking, right?
Not even close.
His lips curved into a rueful grin as he shook his head.
I've been in combat situations with bullets flying all around me, and I've never once felt the need to claim a woman as my own when it was all over. Only you, Cora. You make me feel things I've never experienced before.
I flashed him a watery grin, overwhelmed in the very best way over how he was finally opening up. It's the same for me.
I'm sorry it took nearly losing you for me to pull my head out of my ass.
He pulled me against his chest, burying his face into the crook of my shoulder.
I was so fucking worried about what could go wrong when I was deployed and what that would do to you. I didn't stop to think about the fact that danger can be close to home, too. That it could be me struggling with the idea of something happening to you. When I realized my only regret today was the time we lost because I didn't make you mine sooner, that put it all into perspective for me.
His heartfelt confession erased my doubts over the speed of his change of heart. I had similar thoughts when I wasn't sure if I was going to make it out of this warehouse alive.
Fuck,
he groaned as he held me tighter. Huntley moved so quickly that I was completely blocked from sight, and he had his rifle back in his hands before my brain registered that the police had arrived. It took hours, and a trip to the station in the back of 5 squad cars since they wanted to keep all of us separated, to answer all of their questions about the robbery, my time as a hostage, Jack killing his partner, and Jack's death. They were ready to let me go much sooner than Huntley, but I refused to leave without him. Not when I was the reason he was being interrogated in the first place. If the cops had decided to arrest him, I wanted to be there. Luckily, it hadn't come down to that because the prosecutor agreed with the detectives about it being a clear-cut case of self-defense, since my statement made it obvious that Jack was getting ready to attack. When we walked out of the police station, Huntley's SUV was parked at the front curb. The guys who'd come with him to rescue me were leaning against the side of the vehicle, and a big black pickup truck idled behind them with the man I didn't recognize at the wheel. Huntley lifted his chin in greeting toward him before leading me toward the group by his SUV. He shook each guy's hand before tucking me against his side.
Things went foobar before there was a chance for introductions. Cora, these are a few of my buddies. Cash, Sterling, and Deacon.
Nice to meet you all. I flashed the man a watery smile before pressing my hand over my heart. "I can't thank you enough for what you did for me tonight." Sterling winked at me, and a growl rumbled up Huntley's chest as his friend said, "No thanks needed." Cash's lips curved at the edges as he crossed his arms over his chest, but Deacon flat out grinned. "Trust me, getting to see how territorial Huntley is with you is more than sufficient payment." Huntley shouldered his way past his friends, tugging me along with him. "And on that note, we're out of here." It was obvious from their laughter that the guys weren't offended by our exit, so I waited until we pulled away to say anything. "You didn't have to rush your friends off like that. They risked their lives for me, too."
"You'll have plenty of time to get to know them later."
He reached over to squeeze my thigh.
"Right now, I need to have you all to myself."
I laced my fingers through his and leaned back in my seat. As long as our alone time includes a shower and some food, that sounds great to me.
"You've got a deal,"
he quickly agreed. Less than 10 minutes later, Huntley pulled the SUV into the garage of a small house in a community about a mile from the base. He didn't waste any time in getting us inside and leading me through his bedroom to the bathroom.
"I'll cook while you shower."
Before my brain had a chance to catch up with my mouth, I asked, "Don't you want to take one with me?"
"More than I can say."
His hands fisted so tightly that his knuckles turned white.
"But I'm trying to do the right thing here, Gingersnap. You went through something scary as fuck today, and I don't want to take advantage of the adrenaline high you're experiencing right now. You need food, and I'm going to head into the kitchen because I don't trust myself to stay in here with you for even another minute."
"I need you more than a meal." My soft confession snapped Huntley's control. He closed the distance between us, cupping my cheeks with his hands as he lowered his head to capture my lips. His hard-on pressed against my belly while he devoured my mouth, our tongues tangling as I clutched his shoulders for balance. When he started to pull back, I wasn't ready for the kiss to end and whimpered in protest.
"Don't worry, Gingersnap. There's no way in hell I'm gonna put an end to this now. You want me? You fucking got me."
A thrill of triumph raced up my spine as he turned on the shower and began to help me out of my dirty clothes. When only my bra and panties were left, he quickly stripped down to his boxer briefs. Then he checked the temperature of the water before flicking open my bra clasp and tugging the straps down my arms. His eyes were full of heat as he palmed my breasts and brushed his lips over the hard peaks.
"You're so fucking gorgeous."
"You're not half bad yourself." I stroked my hands up his chest.
"I'll show you not half bad,"
he growled, yanking my panties down my legs as he dropped to his knees and wrapped his hands around my hips. It was a good thing he was holding me steady, because my knees went weak when he ran his tongue up my pussy lips from bottom to top. Without his help, I would have melted into the floor as he devoured me, driving me wild when he paid special attention to my clit.
"Give it to me, Gingersnap. Come on my tongue."
The combination of his growled command and the tug of his lips on my sensitive buds sent me flying over the edge. He licked me through my orgasm, waiting to carry me into the shower until after my shudders subsided. I stayed in a sensual fog as he cleaned me from head to toe before washing himself off. I didn't come out of it until he reached for the faucet. Wrapping my fingers around his forearm, I asked, "What about you?"
"I'm not going to come until I sink my cock inside your sweet pussy."
He turned off the water and opened the shower door to grab a towel. Drying me off, he added,
"And I want you spread out on my bed the first time I take you."
Yawned, ready for him to take me, I grabbed the towel. "Then hurry up so we can make that happen." He barely dried himself off before he hefted me over his shoulder and stalked into the bedroom. After tossing me onto the bed, he followed me down onto the mattress, his muscular body covering every inch of mine. With my thighs cradling his hips, the tip of his dick lined up with my entrance. When he felt my wetness, which had nothing to do with the shower, a low rumble of need crept up his throat.
After so much wasted time, I've finally got you right where you belong. Brace yourself, Gingersnap, because I'm going to fuck you so hard you'll be able to feel me tomorrow.
I've never done this before, but it sounds awesome to me. I wiggled my hips, desperate to feel him inside me. His eyes burned into mine as he growled,
"Are you telling me you're a virgin, Cora? Did you save that cherry for me?"
"Yes," I whispered.
"Then we'll save the hard fucking for tomorrow."
He slowly inched forward, and my nails dug into his shoulders.
"Easy, Gingersnap. I've got you."
I lifted my knees higher to urge him on, and he slid in a little more. "I know you do. I trust you to make this good for me, Huntley."
"I'm going to do a fuck of a lot better than good,"
he vowed as he lifted up on one arm to slide his other hand between our bodies. His thumb circled my clit until I was near the edge again, and he pinched the hard nub between his finger and thumb right before he punched his hips forward in a powerful thrust. The mixture of intense pleasure and the pinch of pain made my senses go haywire. Fireworks went off behind my eyelids as I screamed his name while he held completely still. He waited until my orgasm passed to ask,
"You okay?"
"Uh-huh." My answer turned into a moan when I gave a tentative wiggle of my hips, and a spark of pleasure shot through me.
"Then it's time for me to show you fucking fantastic."
He made good on his promise, giving me another orgasm before building me right back up again. His pace was steady as he grunted,
"Give me one more, baby. I want to feel you come around my cock again."
His raspy request pushed me over the edge. After 3 more powerful thrusts, he planted himself deep and filled me with spurt after spurt of his hot cum. I was messy and hungry, but after all the mind-blowing orgasms he'd given me, I couldn't keep my eyes open another minute. Even after the ordeal I'd gone through today, I fell asleep feeling safer than I'd ever been before. And I owed it all to the sexy sailor holding me as though he'd never let me go.
Chapter 6. Huntley. I woke up with a warm, soft body pressed against me, and the night before flooded my mind. Cora was amazing, and while I was kicking myself for waiting so long to claim her, a part of me still worried about how she would handle my life. If she decided being a military spouse was too much for her, I had no idea how I would ever let her go. After just one night, I couldn't imagine coming home to sleep in a bed without her. SEALs faced a lot of shit in our line of work, and I had no doubt that Cora was my rock, my lifeline, my love. My girl stirred in my arms and lifted her lids slowly, looking up at me with adorable, sleepy eyes. Even after knowing her for so long, I was struck by the beauty of her one green and one blue eye. They were unique, just like Cora. "Morning, Gingersnap," I mumbled before burying my face in her neck and taking a deep breath. Damn, she smelled delicious. She was using one of my arms as a pillow, and I glided the other to rest just below her breasts as I placed tiny kisses on the sensitive skin of her throat. She shivered, and I grinned, loving how much I affected her. "Good morning," she replied in a shy, breathy tone. I brought my head back up and gazed down into her face. Last night was amazing. A pretty blush stole across her cheeks, and she smiled. "I thought so." I laughed and kissed her softly. It quickly heated up, and I rolled her onto her back before covering her body with my own. Our skin sizzled wherever we touched, sending sparks of desire straight to my cock. My groin nestled into hers, pressing my hard erection into the heat of her pussy. She was drenched, and I slid right between her folds as I shifted to settle more fully against her. She moaned, and the sound made my dick swell even more. With one small move, I could slide right into her tight pussy. She'd been a virgin last night, though, and I didn't want to hurt her. But she was making needy little noises that were driving me out of my fucking mind. "You need to come, Gingersnap?" I asked gruffly, as I slid through her wetness again, making sure to rub over her clit with each pass. "Please," she whimpered. "Anything you want." I dipped my head down to take one of her hard peeks in my mouth as I sped up my pace. The heat of her sex and the arousal coating my cock had me near the edge, too. "Huntley," she moaned as her head thrashed against the pillow. Her legs circled my hips, and she bucked up to meet my shallow thrusts. "More," she begged softly. I rubbed harder and switched my attention to the other breast. "No," she gasped as I dragged my cock over her clit. "Inside me." I let her nipple go with a pop and shook my head regretfully. "I don't want to hurt you, Gingersnap." "It hurts to be so empty, Huntley," she whimpered as she squeezed her eyes shut and arched her back. "Please?" "Fuck," I grunted. I couldn't resist her plea. "Exactly," she mumbled. I chuckled and dropped a kiss on her lips before pulling back. This time, when I slid forward, I let the tip of my cock kiss her entrance. I wanted to be gentle so she wouldn't be too sore. "Yes," she moaned, her hands grasping my biceps in an iron grip. Even though I was only in an inch, her walls tightened and massaged my dick, drawing all my blood to my shaft as pleasure rocketed through my whole body. "Fuck!" I shouted as I lost control and surged forward, burying myself to the hilt. Cora screamed, and I looked at her face, worried I'd caused her pain, but her head was thrown back in ecstasy, and she'd clamped down like a vice on my cock. "Huntley, don't stop. Move," she demanded, and if it hadn't been such a fucking turn-on, I would have laughed at the threat of steel in her tone. "Yes, ma'am," I grunted, before retreating to nearly the tip and slamming back in. Shit. Oh, baby, yes. Squeeze that tight little pussy. Fuck. Oh, fuck. Yeah. When I pulled back this time, I stopped a few inches before leaving her warmth. I grasped her legs and pulled them from around me. Then I straddled her, closing her thighs around my cock, making it an even tighter fit. "Keep those legs closed, Gingersnap," I groaned. "Fight to keep my cock inside you." Her walls spasmed as if agreeing for her, and black spots danced in front of my eyes. I caught her hands in mine and laced our fingers together before raising them over her head. Once again, I started to move. As instructed, she fought me every time I tried to pull out, and it wasn't long before we were both breathing heavily and meeting each other thrust for thrust. I pounded in and out, hard and fast. Oh, fuck, yeah. That's it, Cora. Take me deep. Oh, fuck. Fuck. Cora cried out one last time as her climax hit, and the ripples of her pussy walls triggered my own. I shoved in as far as I could go, the tip of my dick bumping her cervix, and shouted her name as I came long and hard. "Damn, Ginger Snap, if that gets any better, you might kill me," I panted as I released her hands and collapsed on her. "Shit, I'm probably crushing you." I started to lift my weight, but she curled her arms around me and held on. "Don't move yet," she requested softly. "You feel so good." And I gently took hold of her chin and forced her to look at me. "You can always tell me anything, Ginger Snap. Always. It's just, it makes me feel so safe, cocooned under you like this." I grinned and took her lips in a tender kiss before saying, "Don't worry, my sweet little Ginger Snap. I plan to have you under me a whole fuck of a lot." Cora giggled, and I kissed her again because I couldn't get enough of her. "Come on, I need to feed you," I groaned as my cock slipped from her tight hold when I lifted off her and rolled to my side. A pretty blush stole across her cheeks, and her eyes dropped to my thick, heavy shaft. It had just barely softened from coming so hard inside her, but it sprang to life under her hungry gaze. I flopped onto my back and prayed for control. "Food, Ginger Snap," I told her. "Real food." I turned my head and winked at her. "If you're still hungry for me once you've had some sustenance, you can feast on me all you want." Cora laughed, and the beautiful sound made my chest tighten and my pulse accelerate. She was so fucking beautiful, and I would do whatever it took to keep her. I rose from the bed and padded over to my dresser. I grabbed a t-shirt and tossed it to my girl before pulling on a pair of boxers. My shirt was several sizes too big for her and hung to just above her knees, giving me an excellent view of her gorgeous legs. Seeing her in my clothes did nothing to help the situation currently tenting my boxers. But she had to be sore from being ridden so hard right after losing her cherry, and we both needed food. So I told my dick to back off and held out my hand to my love. Cora took it with a smile, and I guided her out of the bedroom and downstairs to the kitchen. I grasped her hips and planted her on the counter, then went to work making a couple of omelets. "We don't really know all that much about each other," she said after a period of companionable silence. "What would you like to know? Do you have any family?" I nodded as I sprinkled some chopped vegetables into the egg mixture. "I have one sister, Harlow. She's married to a biker in the Silver Saints MC, and they have a couple of kids. My parents are alive, but they aren't really a part of our lives. How about you?" "No siblings. I was a surprise to my parents after years of trying, so they were a little older when they had me. They're retired and living in Florida." "We'll have to take a trip out to see them," I told her with a smile. "I'd like to meet the people who brought me such an amazing woman." Cora smiled brightly, and we chatted a little more about our lives while I finished cooking. Can I ask you something else?" "I'm an open book to you, Ginger Snap," I replied automatically. But then I realized that wasn't exactly true. Breakfast was done, so I moved over to stand between her legs, my hands resting on her thighs. As much as I can be. You understand that, right? There will always be things I can't share with you, but only when it comes to my job. She nodded, and I waited for a cloud of doubt to enter her eyes. But instead, I saw nothing but sunshine. I kissed her lips quickly, then lifted her down from the counter and walked over to grab our plates and silverware. "Although," I added when a thought occurred to me, "I'll be able to tell you more once we're married."
Chapter 7. Cora. I shook my head, assuming I'd heard him wrong. I'm sorry, what?
There will always be classified stuff that I can't share with you, but once you're my spouse, I'll be able to be more open with you about some things.
He flashed me a sexy smirk and winked as he set everything for our meal on the small round table.
And I won't even have to kill you afterward.
Ha ha, you're so funny. I moved to his side and bumped him with my shoulder. But seriously, you're in the Navy. I totally get that there will be stuff you're not able to tell me. That wasn't the part I needed you to explain. He pulled out the chair in front of me and waited until I was seated to ask,
So it was the mention of marriage that took you by surprise?
My eyes widened at his blasé tone. Yeah, of course it was.
I meant it when I said my only regret was not making you mine sooner.
He nudged one of the plates with an omelet that took up almost every inch of the flat surface.
So you can be damn sure I'm not going to dick around after you gave yourself to me.
I almost choked on the bite of egg I just put in my mouth. After I swallowed it down and took a gulp of orange juice, I wheezed, Having sex last night was fast, but talking about marriage this morning as though it's a foregone conclusion is ultrasonic.
Oh, how wrong you are, Gingersnap.
He grinned at me over the rim of his coffee mug.
We've known each other for more than a year already. That's the opposite of fast. In fact, I'd call it downright snail-like.
I arched my brow and pointed my fork at him. And I'd call what you just said an exaggeration, since we never had more than a short conversation until yesterday.
Don't try to tell me that something wasn't building between us during my visits to the bank.
He reached across the table to grip my left hand with his, brushing his thumb over the pulse point in my wrist.
Because we both know you'd be lying. It might have taken me way too long to pull my head out of my ass, but you've still been mine since day one.
I kind of wished I could deflate Huntley's ego a little since he was so darn confident, but I couldn't deny what he said. And his certainty made him even more attractive, which was saying a lot. I'd thought he was the hottest guy I'd ever seen when we met, and my opinion hadn't changed since then. To avoid responding, I shoved another bite of omelet into my mouth, making him chuckle as he flashed me a knowing look that made it clear I wasn't fooling him at all. When I started to get up to clear the table after we were done eating, he pressed his hand against my shoulder to keep me in my seat.
Relax, Gingersnap. I've got it.
Nuh-uh. I tilted my head back to look up at him. You cooked, which means I clean. That's the rule.
It's a rule, huh?
He bent forward to brush his lips against mine.
Then I guess I can't argue too much.
Exactly. I grabbed my glass and followed him into the kitchen, laughing softly when he started rinsing the plates he was carrying and opened the dishwasher. He glanced over at me and asked,
What?
I kind of assumed that not arguing meant you were going to go along with the rule. I bumped my shoulder against his arm. But you're still cleaning up, so I must have been wrong. He grinned as he stacked the plates in the bottom rack of the dishwasher.
Old habits die hard, I guess.
I handed him a glass after rinsing it in the sink and smiled. Lucky for you. I'm really enjoying the two of us doing everyday stuff together, like washing the dishes. So I won't give you too much crap for bending the cleanup rule. After everything was in the dishwasher and we washed our hands, Huntley caged me in with my back against the sink. With his hands gripping the edge of the counter, he lowered his head to capture my mouth in a deep kiss. I twined my arms around his neck as our tongues tangled. Breathless and more than a little turned on, I whimpered in protest when his phone chirped and he pulled away.
Sorry, Gingersnap. That's the tone I have set for the Rear Admiral, so I can't ignore it.
I was disappointed for our kiss to end, but I understood his job meant he couldn't ignore his phone. He'd made a commitment to the Navy, which I respected. Gesturing toward the phone, I said, "No apology needed. Take the call. I should probably check my phone anyway."
"Thanks."
He brushed his lips against mine again before striding over to the table to grab his phone. I listened to the deep tone as I padded upstairs to the bedroom. I hadn't noticed last night, but my purse and jacket had been in the back seat of Huntley's SUV. Cash, Deacon, and Sterling had been released by the cops much more quickly than we'd been. While we'd been stuck at the police station last night, the guys were busy smoothing things over for us. They got one of their friends to pick them up, headed over to the warehouse to grab Huntley's SUV, and then went back to the bank to grab my stuff. I hadn't even thought to question how his vehicle had gotten there until they texted him this morning. I was dreading the conversation I needed to have with my parents about what had happened yesterday, but I couldn't avoid talking to them forever. I didn't worry too much about them hearing about the robbery and me being taken hostage on the news, since I doubted my ordeal would make national headlines with all the crap going on in the world. But ever since they moved to Florida, we talked at least a couple of times a week. After flopping down on Huntley's mattress, I glanced down at my screen and heaved a deep sigh of relief when there weren't any missed calls from them. Talking to my parents the morning after losing my virginity, and quite thoroughly at that, while wearing nothing but Huntley's shirt, seemed as though it would be even more awkward than having to tell them I could have died yesterday. I needed to go back to my apartment at some point today, so I decided to wait to call them until then. I was scrolling through my social media a few minutes later when Huntley came into the room. As soon as I spotted his frown, I had a feeling I wasn't going to like what he had to say. "What's wrong?" He scrubbed his palms down his face and sighed.
"When you're in the Navy, sometimes shit goes down and plans fly out the window. That's why we always have contingency plans."
"I'm assuming your call was about one of those backup plans?" I asked, patting the mattress as I braced myself for his answer.
"You could definitely put it that way."
He sat down next to me and laced his fingers through mine.
"Even though we've only been back stateside for a little less than 72 hours, they need my team to stand in for another on an upcoming mission."
His expression became a little wary as he finished with,
"I have to head to the base. I can't tell you when we're leaving or how long I'll be gone."
I hated the thought of having so little time with Huntley after everything that had gone down over the past day. But the last thing I wanted to do was say anything that would make him worry about me while he was gone. His focus needed to be on what was important, making it back home alive. And he needed to know that I could handle this life. "Don't worry about me, babe. You do what you need to do, and I'll order a rideshare back to my apartment. The most important thing is that you keep yourself safe and come back to me."
"So damn sweet."
He pressed his forehead against mine.
"I'm going to miss you while I'm gone."
"I'm going to miss you too." I gave him a quick peck on the lips before scrambling off the mattress.
"I wish I had enough time to take you home myself."
A muscle jumped in his jaw. "I'll be fine," I assured him. "I haven't bothered with a car since my apartment is less than a mile from the bank, so I'm used to taking the bus or a rideshare."
"I've a better idea."
He got up and strode over to the dresser. Grabbing his keys, he turned toward me and pressed them into my hand.
"Take my SUV. It'll just sit in a parking lot while I'm gone, and I like knowing you have a vehicle to get wherever you need to be if I'm not around to drive you."
I stared down in shock at the keys he'd given me. "I don't know." He kissed me breathless again before whispering,
"Please, Cora, do this for me."
My heart melted at his plea. "Okay."
"Take all the shit in my fridge home with you, too."
I was about to protest when he added,
"You'd be doing me a favor, since I usually throw it all away before I leave. It fucking sucks to come home to rotten food."
I laughed and shook my head. "When you put it that way, how can I say no?" He flashed me a triumphant grin before patting my butt and nudging me toward the door.
"I'll help you pack it all up once I have everything I need to bring with me."
Less than 20 minutes later, he pulled to the side of the road near the entrance to the base. After he climbed out of the truck, I slid over to the driver's side. He gave me one last kiss before shutting the door. I rolled down the window while he grabbed his bag from the back seat. "Bye, Huntley. Be as safe as you can be for me." His voice was fierce as he corrected,
"Not goodbye, Gingersnap. I'll see you later."
I held on to his vow as I watched him walk through the security gate, a lone tear sliding down my cheek as I sent up a little prayer that he'd come back to me soon.
Chapter 8. Huntley. 6 weeks. What should have been a quick in-and-out mission went foobar the first day. We spent weeks cleaning up the mess while trying not to get ourselves killed. 6 long fucking weeks since I've seen or held my girl. The debriefing nearly did the job of our enemies for us by killing me with boredom and the need to be on the move. Afterward, I couldn't get my ass off the base fast enough. I threw Deacon a deadly glare when he chuckled for the 5th time while giving me a ride to Cora's place. "I'm going to knock that smirk off your face if you don't stop, Dee. I can't help it. You're really whipped for this girl, aren't you?" "You say whipped. I say devoted to the woman of my dreams." I tossed him my own smirk this time. "I can't wait until this happens to you. I'm going to enjoy every second of rubbing it in your pretty boy face." Deacon snorted. "The rest of us aren't as gooey inside as you, Huntley." I rolled my eyes and ignored him the rest of the way. When he finally pulled up to Cora's duplex, I didn't even wait for the car to stop before I jumped out. Deacon had obviously anticipated this reaction because my duffel came sailing out the door right behind me. I slammed it shut, grabbed my bag, and waved at Deacon as I jogged up the walkway to the front door. When I was standing in front of it, I paused. I didn't want to freak Cora out with my intensity, so I took a few deep breaths to calm down. That was the last of my patience. I rang the doorbell twice, then waited and waited and waited before anxiously knocking on the door. Or maybe it had only been a few seconds. I wasn't sure. When the door finally swung open and I laid eyes on my Cora, all the air in my lungs whooshed out, and I stood frozen. I kept telling myself she couldn't possibly be as beautiful in real life as I remembered. But she was 10 times more gorgeous than any image of her in my mind. Her red hair was pulled up and piled on her head, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, and she was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, her feet bare. She looked adorable and sexy all at the same time. But it wouldn't have mattered how she was dressed. All I could see was the joy shining in her eyes, the love confirming she was mine. "Hey there, Gingersnap," I drawled with a deep smile. Cora screamed and jumped into my arms, wrapping herself around me and pressing her lips to mine. I put one hand under her juicy ass to hold her up and the other behind her head, taking control of the kiss. "Fuck, I missed you," I grunted, before plunging my tongue into her mouth and groaning at her delicious taste. I had just enough clarity of mind to kick my bag inside before following it and using the same foot to shut the door. Walking somewhat blindly, I managed to find a wall and pressed Cora against the vertical surface while I devoured her. I'd been stiff since we got back to base, but the second I saw my girl, my cock became hard as fuck. Using my hips to hold her in place, I gripped the edge of her shirt and whipped it over her head before dipping down to place hot, wet, open-mouthed kisses along her collarbone and cleavage. I said a prayer of thanks for front-clasping bras and flicked hers open so her tits spilled into my waiting palms. "Huntley," she panted, "we need to— Oh, yes. Yes." She lost her train of thought when I sucked on one of her hard, swollen nipples as I cupped her tits and gently massaged the heavy globes. I let the pebbled peak pop out of my mouth, and before going to the other, I inspected her gorgeous breasts. "I feel like these have gotten bigger, Gingersnap." I flicked my tongue over the tip, then gently blew on it, enjoying the shiver that racked her body. "Not that I'm complaining," I mumbled, before drawing it between my lips and taking a deep pull. My hips rocked into hers, and suddenly Cora's head thumped back against the wall, and she screamed as she shattered in my arms. "Holy shit!" I whispered in awe as I leaned back to watch the pleasure play over her face. I rubbed the bulge in my jeans against her center, drawing out her orgasm as long as possible. My cock leaked steadily as I watched her, making a mess inside my pants and warning me that I wasn't going to last much longer. Cora finally stopped shuddering, and her cheeks turned pink as she opened her eyes to gaze at me. "I'm sorry. I don't know what happened." "Gingersnap, why are you apologizing? That was one of the sexiest things I've ever seen in my life." I grinned. "Are they always that sensitive?" We hadn't been together long enough for me to thoroughly explore her body last time. The pink on her cheeks deepened to crimson, and she wiggled as she shook her head. "No, that's what I need." I was distracted by her movements and the way her tits were bouncing with each breath. I barely registered her words, knowing if I didn't get inside her soon, I was going to blow like a fucking virgin on prom night. "I'll give you what you need, baby," I growled, before attacking her mouth once more. Her place was small and only one level, so it didn't take me long to stumble my way into finding her bedroom. I tossed her on the mattress and grinned as I yanked her shorts and underwear off with a swoosh. My shirt, jeans, and boxers landed next to them on the ground before I crawled onto the bed and covered her body with mine. I groaned at the exquisite feel of our skin pressed together and the heat of her pussy bathing my cock. "Did you miss me, Gingersnap?" I asked, as I planted kisses all over her face and down her throat. "Yes, so much," she moaned. I started to kiss my way down her body, but she grabbed my shoulders, so I stopped and looked up at her. Her already flushed skin went a shade deeper, and she glanced away for a moment. "You can tell me anything, remember?" "It's just, last time, it was my turn." She bit her lip, and her eyes drifted down between us. I grinned and got onto my hands and knees above her. "Are you asking for my cock, Gingersnap?" She nodded shyly, and I didn't know whether to kiss her or let her wrap her lips around my shaft. The latter won out. "I don't know what I'm doing." "I'll teach you how to suck my cock, baby, and only my cock. Now, scoot up on the bed," I instructed her. She did as she was told, and I slowly positioned myself to straddle her face. "Open up, Gingersnap." Her mouth parted, and I fisted my dick to slowly feed it between her plump lips. "Oh, fuck," I grunted at the feel of her warm, wet cavern surrounding my dick. When she swirled her tongue around the head, my knees went weak, so I grabbed the headboard. "That feels so good, baby. Now, suck." My head started spinning when she pulled me deep, hollowing out her cheeks. "Oh, fuck yeah, Cora. Just like that." "Can you take me deeper?" She nodded. "Just relax, Gingersnap. I'm going to push in farther. When you feel me at the back of your throat, swallow." Little by little, I fed her more of my dick until I finally bumped into a barrier. Cora immediately swallowed, and I shouted in ecstasy. She gagged for a second, and I tried to pull back, but she grasped my ass and yanked me forward. Oh, fuck yes. Fuck. Suck it hard, baby. Fuck. When my balls drew up and started tingling, I knew I was close. "I'm going to come, Cora," I warned. I'd intended to come in her mouth, but at the last second I changed my mind. I pulled out and moved to kneel between her legs as I asked, "Are you on birth control, Gingersnap?" No, but you don't have to." "Oh!" For some reason, that knowledge broke my control. I grabbed her ankles and spread her legs as wide as they would go before pressing them back slightly. Then I widened my stance, lowering my body until my cock was lined up with her dripping, pink pussy. "So wet for me," I groaned as I began to slide inside her snug channel. "Fuck, you're just as tight as the night I popped your cherry, Gingersnap," I gritted out through clenched teeth. It was taking everything in me not to come right then. When I was almost completely sheathed, I bent over her just a little to slide in the last couple of inches. "Huntley," Cora moaned as her head thrashed from side to side. I retreated a few inches and bucked my hips hard, thrusting back in. Shit, Gingersnap. I could live in this pussy. So fucking hot. I set the slowly increasing rhythm until I was fucking her hard and fast. I watched my cock disappear and reappear, each time glistening a little more as it was continually coated in her juices. "Huntley, oh yes, yes, harder." Since I was holding her legs up and open, I rasped, "Play with those big sexy tits for me, baby." Cora glided her hands up her torso to cup her globes, and cum spurted from my tip. She squeezed them, then plucked her nipples. "So fucking hot," I grunted, speeding up even more. She toyed with the rosy buds, then she pinched them, and the walls of her pussy clamped hard around my cock. "Cora! Fuck, baby! Oh yeah! Fuck! Fuck!" I quickly dipped my thumb between her pussy lips to make it wet before rubbing furiously over her swollen clit. She went off like a rocket, and I finally allowed myself to let go. I roared her name as hot cum erupted from my cock. My hips continued to work her hard and fast, slamming in and out until I'd pushed her over the edge one more time. Finally, I was empty, and my dick softened a little. I slowed to a stop and lowered her legs, wrapping them around my waist. Then I rolled us over so she was sprawled on my chest, my cock still buried deep inside her. You have no idea how many times I dreamed about falling asleep like this, I murmured sleepily. I'd never felt more content in my life, and it only took a moment before I drifted off. My eyes flew open, and I looked wildly around in the dark for the source of the sound that had ripped me from sleep. A sliver of light from the bathroom door drew my attention, and I heard the sound again. What the fuck? Quickly climbing out of bed, I hurried to the bathroom and gently pushed the door open. "Gingersnap?" I asked when I spotted Cora on the floor in front of the toilet. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she sighed. Then she heaved and bent over the bowl to throw up again. "Bullshit," I barked. "I'm taking you to the hospital."
Chapter 9. Cora. When I was done dry heaving, I lifted my head and groaned, "It's just a little puking. I don't need to go to the hospital."
There isn't anything left in your stomach and you're still nauseous. That's a fuck of a lot of puking, not a little.
"This wasn't how I was planning to tell you," I muttered as he helped me to my feet. I felt bad that I'd allowed myself to be distracted with sex before we had the conversation I'd been waiting for weeks to have with him. But the moment he'd touched me, all rational thought fled my brain. My body was more sensitive, and I'd been instantly blown away by the intense pleasure of Huntley's touch.
Tell me what? Have you been sick while I've been gone?
His fingers dug into my hips as he guided me over to the sink. After rinsing my mouth out with water and swishing some mouthwash, I heaved a deep sigh and met Huntley's gaze in the mirror. "I wouldn't say I'm sick exactly."
What exactly would you call it then?
He turned me until we were facing each other, worry shining from his hazel eyes. My hands felt warm and sweaty as nervous butterflies swirled in my stomach. Ever since I found out that I was pregnant, I'd wondered how this conversation would go. Huntley knew I wasn't on birth control and still came inside me without any protection. But his decision could have been made in the heat of the moment without thinking about the possible consequences. Turning up pregnant after our first night together came as a huge shock to me, so I could only assume he'd be surprised too. I braced myself for his reaction as I blurted, "An unfortunate side effect of pregnancy." He stepped back, his gaze dropping to my still flat belly. His voice was shaky when he asked,
"You're pregnant?"
"Yeah. I haven't been to the doctor yet to confirm, but I took 3 at-home tests about a month ago that were all positive." I twisted to my left and opened the cabinet drawer to pull out the little white sticks that I'd kept. "You might not want to touch these since I peed on them, but I thought maybe you'd like to see them."
I had my tongue shoved inside your pussy while I ate you to orgasm. I think I can handle touching something you peed on that's been dry for weeks.
His lips curved into a grin as he reached for one of the tests and stared down at the results window.
Pregnant?
With how new our relationship was, I was surprised that he seemed excited by the news. His smile grew as he checked each test before placing the stick on the counter. After setting the third one down, he gripped my hips and crushed me against his chest. Burying his face into the crook of my neck, he pressed hot kisses against my sensitive skin. "I take it you're happy about the pregnancy?" I asked with a shiver as I tilted my head to the side to give him better access to my neck.
Happy doesn't begin to describe what I'm feeling right now.
He sucked on my skin just hard enough to leave a mark before pulling away to grin down at me.
I'm fucking thrilled, Gingersnap. The little guy you're carrying is going to be the perfect blend of you and me.
I wasn't even a tiny bit surprised that he assumed our baby would be a boy. Laughing softly, I shook my head. "You do realize it could be a girl, right?"
If she is, then I might need to buy a couple more guns.
He brushed a lock of my hair off my cheek.
With you for her mom, she's bound to be fucking gorgeous.
My sputtered laughter from the mental image of him scaring boys away from our daughter changed to a watery sigh at his compliment. "You're getting way ahead of yourself." I pressed my palm against my stomach. "I'm not even showing yet, and from what I read online, we won't find out what we're having for another 2 months at least." He covered my hand with his and asked,
When is our girl going to pop this belly out and let everyone know she's in there?
I loved how easily he'd started calling the baby a girl. "Probably another month or 2.
That doesn't give us a lot of time to plan a wedding.
A wrinkle popped up in the middle of his brow.
Do you want to do a big ceremony? Or would you be okay with eloping? Barring an emergency, I should be good to take leave for a couple of days as long as we don't travel too far. I just need to clear it first. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Take a deep breath, close your eyes if you like, listen to a few minutes of relaxing music, and then return gently to the story.
I pressed my palms against his chest. We don't need to rush off and get married just because I'm pregnant.
The pregnancy isn't why I want to make you my wife. I already told you that I was going to marry you our first night together, remember?
He reminded me before brushing his lips over mine.
Beyond being able to tell you some details I wouldn't be able to share with you otherwise, there are benefits you'd get as my spouse. With a baby on the way, I want you to have access to every bit of assistance the Navy provides as soon as possible.
What he was saying made sense, but I didn't want to hear all the sensible reasons I should marry the guy I'd fallen hard and fast for. Pressing my lips together, I scrunched my nose while I thought about how to respond. Getting married shouldn't be a decision based on logic. The start of our lives together should be about emotion, about what we feel for each other. My voice wavered at the end, and I had to fight tears. Talking about getting married was already hard, and the pregnancy hormones were making me more emotional than usual.
Hey now.
Huntley cupped my cheeks with his palms and tilted my head back to brush his lips over mine.
Don't cry, Gingersnap. The baby and getting married are supposed to be happy things, not sad.
I know, I sniffled as tears started to stream down my cheeks. But this isn't exactly a normal situation. We only had one night together before you had to leave. There wasn't any time for us to do all the normal relationship stuff. And now here we are. I'm knocked up, and you feel as though you have to propose."
"You've got it backward, Cora."
He kissed away my tears and smiled down at me.
"I don't feel pressure to marry you. If anything, it's the opposite, and I'm using your pregnancy to my advantage. It's the perfect opportunity to tie you to me permanently, and I'm not above doing whatever it takes to make you mine forever."
That sounded an awful lot as though he wanted this for himself. But I still asked, "Because of the baby?"
"No, Cora. I want to spend the rest of my life with you because I fucking love you."
He captured my mouth in a deep kiss, leaving me breathless when he lifted his head again.
"If I hadn't wasted so much damn time after we met, I have no doubt you'd already be my wife. I want to kick my own ass for giving you reason to doubt my intentions. But please don't hold my mistake against me. Make me the happiest man on earth. Say yes. Marry me."
"You love me?" I echoed in wonder.
"Damn straight I do. You were already on my mind every single day I was gone the last time we were deployed. But it was different this time. After our night together, I yearned for you with every cell in my being."
He shook his head and chuckled.
"Ask any of the guys. They'll tell you I'm head over heels for you. Hell, Deacon didn't even react when I jumped out of his vehicle before he stopped. He just tossed my bag after me and laughed as he drove away."
I peered up at him in surprise. "Did you really do that?"
"Yeah."
He shrugged his broad shoulders.
"I was impatient to get back to you after being gone longer than I should have been."
Huntley's lack of embarrassment while making that confession gave me the boost I needed to admit, "I love you too."
"Hoo-yah!"
His grin turned cocky before he kissed me again, our tongues tangling together until my knees went weak and I was gripping his shoulders for balance.
"And you're going to marry me as soon as we can set things up however you want."
He didn't word it as a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, I'd love to be your wife. With my parents down in Florida, I like the idea of going to the courthouse or eloping and then doing something later to celebrate."
"Fucking fantastic," he rasped. "Figure out what you want to wear and I'll grab some flowers on my way back from my place to get my whites. Then we can head down to the courthouse."
"Today?" I asked with a giggle. He stepped away and nudged me toward the door.
"Yup. There's no time like the present."
I was moving a little more slowly than usual because of the pregnancy, but Huntley more than made up for it. In the time it took me to get ready, he changed into his dress uniform, rounded up several of his friends to act as our witnesses, got me an engagement ring plus wedding bands for both of us, and bought a gorgeous bouquet of white roses. Less than 4 hours later, we stood hand in hand in front of the judge and exchanged our vows.
Epilogue. Huntley. Huntley! I halted on the way to my car in the parking lot and turned to see Deacon running toward me. "What?" My tone was filled with annoyance, but I didn't care. I was anxious to get home and see my wife. "Why aren't you answering your phone, dipshit?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Deacon stopped when he reached my side. "Your wife has been calling." He gave me a dry look. "She thought you might want to know that she's in labor." "What the fuck?" I dug in my pocket and yanked out my phone to see 25 missed calls. I wanted to kick my own ass up and down the street when I realized I hadn't turned my phone off silent after the debriefing. It was bad enough my leave got cut short when there was an emergency and I had to deploy, not knowing if I'd be back for the birth of my son. Now, I might miss it anyway just because I was a complete idiot, not to mention the fact that I should have been there for Cora. I ran the rest of the way to my car, my mind spinning over the fact that I was about to be a dad. Holy shit. I tried to put my keys in the lock, but my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't line it up with the opening. Deacon grabbed them from my hand and quickly unlocked the door. Then he opened it and shoved me inside. He tossed my keys at me and then jogged around to the other side to drop into the passenger seat. Once again, I couldn't get the key in the hole. Deacon sighed and threw me a look that suggested I'd lost my mind. As quickly as he entered, he popped out of the car and appeared at my still-open door. "What the hell is wrong with you, man?" I was as shocked as him. I constantly put my life on the line and was known for being cool under pressure. But now, when I needed it most, I was a fucking wreck. Deacon grabbed my arm and yanked me out before shoving me toward the rear. "Get in the car, asshole," he shouted as he dropped into the driver's seat. I hurried to do as instructed, and he started the car. He took off like a bat out of hell, but I still urged him to speed up. "Hurry the fuck up, my wife is in labor." "No shit," he responded. He turned down the opposite road from Cora's and my house, and I glanced in the other direction, confused. "Where are you going, Deacon?" "She's already at the hospital." "Well, shit. Get there." "What the hell do you think I'm doing?" After what seemed like an eternal ride, that would have turned a civilian's hair gray, he squealed into the hospital parking lot and screeched to a stop in front of the entrance. I flew out of the car, not bothering to shut the door or say a word, and ran inside. When I approached the desk, I demanded to see my wife in the same tone I would use to train a batch of new recruits. The nurse behind the counter was not impressed, and she raised an eyebrow. We had a stare down, but I broke first and lowered my voice to ask politely how to find Cora. She gave me instructions, and I sprinted down the hallway to the elevator. I jumped on, but Deacon slipped inside before the doors closed. "What are you doing here? No way am I going to miss this," he said with a wide grin. "You are not watching the birth of my son, asshole," I snarled. Deacon's smile stretched even further. "I meant watching you freak out. The guys want updates. Mind if I take some pictures? I wonder if I can get some popcorn around here." I cuffed him on the back of the head, but he just laughed heartily. The elevator whooshed open, and I jogged down to another set of double doors that led to the maternity ward waiting room. I pointed at a chair and gave Deacon a look that said he better sit down and shut up. Another nurse sat behind a glass window, and she looked up at me as I neared. "Reed. Wife. Cora. I couldn't string two damn words together." The nurse's eyes twinkled, but she held back her smile and calmly gave me the room number. I left Deacon laughing behind me as I burst through yet another set of doors. My shoes squeaked on the white linoleum floor as I found my way to room 4. Cora was reclining on a hospital bed, her expression worried. When she saw me, her blue and green gaze filled with joy and relief. Then her eyes narrowed, and she glared at me. "Cutting it kind of close, babe." "I am so sorry, Gingersnap," I sighed as I ran my hands through my hair. "I couldn't get my car and my keys," I sputtered as I strode to her side, the words coming out all wrong. "Deacon ran me here, and I drove to your room as fast as I could." Cora's lips pinched for a second before she broke out into a peal of giggles. "Who are you, and what have you done with my cool and collected husband?" I gathered her into my arms and touched my forehead to hers with a deep sigh. I can't get over it. I'm going to be a dad. I don't know what to do with a baby. What if he breaks when I hold him? What if— "Huntley," Cora interrupted my rambling with a chuckle. "I can't." Panic rose in my throat when she stopped and grimaced in pain, leaning forward to put her hands on her large belly. "Are you okay? Is something wrong with the baby? Should I get the doctor?" A small part of my brain muttered that I was overreacting, but it was overpowered by all the irrational emotions. Cora shook her head and placed a hand on my forearm, squeezing it as she breathed through the contraction. Damn, her grip was fucking strong. I was definitely going to have bruises when this was over. Finally, the pain subsided, and she leaned back against the pillows. She smirked and giggled again. I can't believe a little baby scares you more than anything you've encountered on one of your missions. I gave her a mock glare before chuckling along with her. Then I placed a quick kiss on her lips, and as I pulled back, her face contorted in pain again. Should you be in this much pain? Just then, a woman in a long white coat strolled into the room, examining a clipboard. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled. This is the husband, I take it? I'm Dr. Benson. Why is she in so much pain? Can't you do something? I demanded, the soldier in me returning. The doctor just continued to smile, ignoring my outburst as she sat on a stool and examined my wife. Cora is allergic to the epidural, so she's going to have to do this naturally. She met my wife's gaze and nodded encouragingly. Are you ready? It's time. Cora was in the middle of another contraction, her nails digging into my flesh hard enough to draw blood. Let's roll, she mumbled. With every push, my heart rate increased and my breathing became shallower. One last push, the doctor called out. The sound of a baby's cry split the air, and my head started spinning. Then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, and several pairs of eyes were staring at me in shock. Did you say your husband was a Navy SEAL? Someone asked Cora in a loud whisper. Shit. I was never going to live this down. He's perfect, Gingersnap, I told Cora softly as I stared down at my son. She ran a hand over his fuzzy little head and smiled blissfully. When her blue and green eyes raised to mine, I bent and kissed her forehead. Thank you, I said reverently. Cora smiled. You're welcome. But what for? For this? Our life? Our family? For giving me something to fight for while I'm away and a reason to come home. Cora's eyes filled with tears, and she laughed as she dashed them away. Hormones, she muttered with a sweet laugh. We never would have had this if you hadn't rescued me. Her gaze filled with love that I felt to my very soul as she flashed me a watery smile. You've got that backward, Gingersnap. You're the one who rescued me.
Epilogue. Cora. I wasn't shocked when Huntley suggested we put an in-ground pool in our backyard. As a Navy SEAL, it went without saying that he swam like a fish. With a toddler and another baby on the way, I hadn't been thrilled by the idea. I already had my hands full running after our son when Huntley was deployed. The last thing I needed was to worry nonstop about West escaping from the house and falling into the pool. Even at 2, our son was a risk-taker like his dad. I couldn't count the number of times he'd climbed out of his crib by the time he was 1 year old. Although we'd turned the crib around so the higher slats were facing out and lowered the mattress as close to the floor as it would go, it never took West long to figure another way out. But Huntley had assured me that he could baby-proof the pool, and as I watched him teach our 2-year-old how to swim, I was glad I trusted my husband wholeheartedly. Seeing him share his love for the water with our son melted my heart, which wasn't that difficult to do since I was halfway through my 3rd trimester and my pregnancy hormones were raging. Rubbing over the spot where our daughter kicked against my swollen belly, I waddled across the patio toward the pool. Huntley tossed West into the air, and I grinned at his boyish squeal of laughter when he fell back into the water, confident that his daddy would catch him. Splashing water into Huntley's face by slapping his palms against the surface of the pool, he spotted me out of the corner of his eye and shrieked, "Mommy, see, I swimmin'!" "You're doing a great job, sweetie." West squirmed as though he was trying to break free from Huntley's hold to swim across to me. So he carried him over as I slowly crouched down to sit at the edge of the pool and dangle my feet into the water. Huntley's eyes narrowed when I let out a low moan and rubbed the left side of my rounded stomach.
"What's wrong? Are you having contractions?"
West's head tilted to the side, his bottom lip jutting out a little. "Mommy have owie?" "Not an owie." I gently wrapped my fingers around his wrist and pressed his palm over the spot where the baby was kicking. "Your sister is just reminding me that she's in there." Excitement shone from his hazel eyes, the same shade as his dad's. "Mommy have baby now?" "Not yet." I lifted 4 fingers. "We have 4 more weeks to go before your sister comes, sweetie." West nodded and pulled his hand free to pat Huntley's cheek. "And Daddy take nap."
"I'm never going to live that down,"
Huntley groaned, his eyes narrowing as he shook his head.
"I can't believe my little man is getting in on the action of making fun of me for what happened when he was born."
I giggled so hard that I snorted, earning me a glare from my husband. Uncle Deacon reminded him of the story when he dropped off about 20 pounds of strip steaks for tomorrow. When the pool was finished a couple of months ago, we'd started having everyone over for a barbecue almost every Saturday. Huntley did most of the cooking on his new propane grill, smoker, and flat-top grill. He basically had a whole kitchen set up outdoors, and the guys had a lot of fun putting it all to good use whenever we got together.
"Remind me to burn his steak,"
Huntley grumbled. I clutched my belly as I laughed again. Deacon was picky about how his red meat was cooked, preferring it medium rare. He always tried to bump Huntley out of the way to take over at the grill when steaks or burgers were involved, since he thought he was the only one who could get them done right. That'll teach him to get our sweet, innocent little boy involved in your manly insults. "Nuh-uh," West puffed out his chest. "I'm not little. I'm big boy now. See? I swim." Our son wiggled his little body until Huntley set him free so he could show me the progress he'd made during today's lesson. He only let Wes swim within easy reach, moving with him while our son showed me how he could kick his legs and put his face in the water before tilting his head all the way back to take a breath. After he swam around for a few minutes, Huntley guided him back toward me.
"Show Mommy the bubbles you can make."
"Oh yeah, I forgot it!" West cried before plopping his face down in the water again and blowing bubbles in the surface of the water for a few seconds. When he lifted his head again, he had to blink his eyes a few times to clear them, but he didn't whine about it at all. I wasn't even sure if he noticed. If I didn't know better, I would have thought he'd been born in the water with how quickly he'd taken to it. "Wow, West, you're getting so good. You'll be swimming with Daddy in the ocean before you know it." He nodded enthusiastically. "Uh-huh, I'm gonna swim in the waves."
"You have plenty of time to practice before our next time at the beach, buddy."
Huntley ruffled West's wet hair before lifting him out of the pool.
"We're not going back until after your sister is here and big enough to come with us."
With as big as I was, how often I needed to pee, and how hot I got, going to the beach was the last thing I wanted to do when the highs were in the mid-90s lately. West didn't mind too much since he got to swim in the pool almost every day. But he was still an impatient toddler. "Soon I be big brother and we go to beach?" "Yep." I swaddled him in a towel and carefully pulled him onto my lap. "Your sister will be here before you know it, and then you'll be her big brother."
"It's a good thing I'll have you to help me, buddy."
Huntley pulled himself out of the pool and lifted West into the air.
"It's going to be tough on me when your sister grows up to be as pretty as your mommy."
West looked like Huntley's mini-me as he smiled down at me and said, "Mommy's so pretty." "I'm going to have my hands full with you since you're going to be as handsome and charming as your daddy." And I wouldn't have it any other way. The worst day of my life had led me to everything I'd ever wanted. This concludes Rescued by the Seal by Fiona Davenport, narrated by Jack Callahan and Tieran Wilder, both members of SAG-AFTRA. Copyright 2021 by Fiona Davenport. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Fiona Davenport, care of SBR Media, and was produced in the year 2024 by Tantor Media Incorporated, a division of Recorded Books, which holds the copyright thereto. Please visit tantor.com for more information on our growing library of unabridged audiobooks.